The United States has once again stood by its vow of as long as it takes. Ukraine is all set to receive its first batch of cluster munitions. It follows months of internal bickering over the deal. You see, these munitions are controversial, to say the least. They are banned by most countries around the world. Even President Joe Biden had to bypass a law prohibiting the production, and this is because of its high failure rate. And to understand the controversy, we need to understand how they work. Cluster weapons explode in the air over a target. Cluster bombs, these weapons explode in the air over a target, releasing dozens to hundreds of smaller sub-munitions across an area. And more than 120 countries see this as inhumane because the unexploded sub-munitions endanger both friendly troops as also the civilians. The impact could be felt decades after the end of a conflict as well. And the ones that the US is giving to Ukraine are DPCIMs. The Pentagon does not use them itself. They were banned in the year 2016. And so how is Ukraine planning on using this controversial weapon? Cluster bombs are already in use in the ongoing war. Both the Ukrainians and the Russians have used them. Ankara, in fact, has provided Kiev with these munitions. The aid from Washington coming at a crucial time. There have been growing concerns about Kiev's lagging counteroffensive. The West has been providing its share of weapons, but the arsenal is depleting at a rather alarming rate. So will the cluster bombs be a game changer as far as this conflict is concerned is the question that arises. And most experts do not think so, but they are an attractive option for the commanders. And for more on this, with us on the broadcast is Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin, joining us from Birmingham, UK. Thanks very much for being here with us. I want to first understand from you your reaction on America's decision, which has now come through after a lot of speculation. They have decided to arm Ukraine with the cluster bombs. What do you make of that move?
Well, I think there have been intense discussions between Ukraine and international partners, including the Americans, about cluster munitions for quite some time. I think there are two factors which have been highlighted in those discussions. The first is it is clearly against international law to use cluster munitions against civilian targets, something which Russia has done earlier in its invasion. And I think, of course, Ukraine has to give assurances that these cluster munitions will be used exclusively on military personnel, which is likely to be the case. In fact, will be the case when you talk about the Ukrainian counteroffensive facing these fortified Russian defenses that have been built up for months. The second issue has been the one which has been raised by Human Rights Watch and others, which is of unexploded munitions. And those are munitions left behind after a conflict which threaten civilians. The Pentagon has said this week that the dud rate, in other words, the number of munitions that fail to explode, has been decreased with advances. It's now about 2.3%. That's still above the Pentagon's threshold of 1% for its own use of these munitions. But I think it is sort of highlighting the fact that if Ukraine gets these munitions, that they will have to make sure that as much caution is made that civilians are not endangered. But given that many of these areas that Russia is defending are depopulated, I do think it means that the risk to civilians is not going to be to the same extent that we would have seen in, say, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, or even Syria when the Russians used them there in recent years.
Right. Scott Lucas, thanks very much for those perspectives. We're leaving it there for the moment as we continue to track those developments coming in. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.